Good evening and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Dean Sluyter. My name's Jamie Madsen. I'll be your host for the evening, and I just have a couple quick things to note before we dive in. The format tonight will feature between 35 to 45 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. For any questions or comments that you have, please go ahead and submit them under the Q&A icon, which is right in the bottom right of your screen. Also, keep an eye on your chat box. I will be sharing discount codes tonight and previous titles by Dean. So now I'm really excited to introduce tonight's author. Dean Sluyter has led meditation workshops and retreats throughout the US since 1970. For 33 years, he taught English and literature of enlightenment at the Pingree School. He currently lives in California, where he sings with the Threshold Choir, plays old songs on the ukulele, and happily zips about on his Vespa. So he is with us tonight to discuss his brand new title, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. And thanks for being with us tonight, Dean. I'm really excited to hand it over to you.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's kind of an odd format here because I'm not seeing the folks, but I'm seeing myself and seeing you. But here's the book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. And this is published, by the way, by New World Library. This is my 6th book, my first one with them. And I think they did a really just beautiful job of putting this together. It's a nice object. It's a very exciting thing for an author, you know, when you've spent a year or a few years of your life writing a book. In this case, this one, and I'll say a little bit more about this, this one was gestating for about over 45 years. And to finally have it in a form that I can hold in my hand, and yesterday was the official publication date, so pretty exciting. And I'm especially happy to be doing an event at Copperfields. Your area around Sonoma County and thereabouts are my old stomping grounds. I actually went to Sonoma State College in the early 70s, way before Jamie was born, I believe. And at that time, I don't know about now, but at that time, Sonoma State College was known as kind of a bit of a hippie school. And I managed to convince all of my teachers to let me go away for a year. No, for a semester, right? I went away for a semester I went to Europe, first to Mallorca and then to Fuji, Italy, to hang out with my then teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and basically meditate for 5 months. Just spend basically 5 months looking at the insides of my eyelids, exploring consciousness and awakening through the practice of meditation. And then I came back near the end of the semester, and for my psychology class, I wrote a paper about the psychology of meditation. And for my English classes, I wrote papers about literature and meditation and got credit. So it was the right place at the right time for me. So the origin of this book is that, as Jamie said, I've been teaching and practicing meditation and various forms of awakening since 1970. And I taught at this fancy prep school. I taught English for 33 years. And, you know, you keep going back every year and teaching Macbeth. Next year, teach Macbeth. Next year, teach Macbeth. Next, Huckleberry Finn. Next year, teach Huckleberry Finn, etc. And all this time, I'm doing my meditation. I'm teaching meditation. I'm diving deeper and deeper into the enlightenment texts of India and Tibet, and hanging out with lamas and rishis and so forth. And you start to connect the dots. So I started seeing, for instance, wait a minute, when Huck Finn, and actually I'll read you, let me read you this little passage from Huckleberry Finn. When most of you probably are familiar with the basic story, Huck Finn is this boy living in rural Missouri, in the small town rural Missouri in the 1830s, has to run away from the very civilized widow who's trying to raise him, and then also from his brutal drunken father. The two opposites who are on the two opposite sides of the Mississippi River, right? So right here we're starting to see an awakening theme. Oh, the pairs of opposites. Here's too tight. Here's too loose. What goes up the middle? Where's what the Buddha called the golden middle path up the river? For Huck, that's the Mississippi. So now, the first time we see him, when he manages to run away from his father after his father almost kills him during a violent drunken rampage. Listen to this. He says, "I didn't lose no time. The next minute I was a spinning downstream, soft but quick in the shade of the bank. I got out amongst the driftwood and then laid down in the bottom of the canoe and let her float. I laid there and had a good rest and a smoke out of my pipe, looking away into the sky, not a cloud in it. The sky looks ever so deep when you lay down on your back in the moonshine. I never knowed it before." Okay, so 33 years of teaching that book with that passage, I start connecting the dots and saying, wait a minute, I can see something deeper going on here. So here's now my commentary on that passage in the book. I say, this is about as clear a baptism in the transcendent as anyone has ever written. After the hectic scramble to get clear of Pap Finn, Huck lets go, lying on his back in a posture of utter passivity. He gives up rowing and steering, allows the boat to merge anonymously with the mass of drifting timbers, and basks in the moonlight. This is how to meditate. Let her float. And the result is a vision of unobstructed boundlessness. As Huck says, the sky looks ever so deep. In fact, a favorite method in Vajrayana Buddhist practice is called Namkai Naljor, sky gazing meditation, literally gazing open-eyed into the ever so deep sky and losing yourself in it. With this initiation into a new dimension of experience, I never knowed it before, the journey can commence in earnest. Leaving behind the stifling civilization of the widow Douglass on one bank and Pap's terrifying chaos on the other bank, Huck sets forth down the river that runs between them. Okay, so you start to see the method in my madness here. This is the kind of thing that kept happening to me over and over. I kept seeing these connections and saying, wow, this is exciting stuff. Am I the first person seeing this stuff? I don't know. But it started to feel more and more as if someone needed to unpack the Dharma. You know, Dharma, many of you are familiar with the term Dharma. It's a big word. Essentially, Dharma means the path of awakening. And I saw someone needed to do the Dharma unpacking of all of these classics of Western literature. And it started to get more and more clear to me that I was the best qualified person to do it that I knew. So that's what I did. So let me read you another bit. Let me read you from my chapter on William Blake. Blake is a favorite of Dharma bums every year. Oh, I should mention, by the way, many of you know that there's a novel published in 1950 something called The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac. And so I borrowed the first couple of words of my title, the Dharma bums, from Jack Kerouac. He actually did not come up with those words himself. As he explains in his novel, that originally originated with the poet Gary Snyder, who's still alive in Northern California. Gary Snyder first came up with this idea of the Dharma bums. And as I say, surf bums follow the surf everywhere. That becomes their passion. Ski bums follow the snow wherever it is. I like to think of myself as a Dharma bum. Wherever the enlightenment, wherever the awakening, wherever the Dharma leads us, that's where we got to go. And in this book, I'm following it through literature. So here is William Blake, who is a favorite poet of Dharma bums everywhere. I'll read you the first page or two or three of this chapter. And the chapter is called Eternity's Sunrise. I've experienced sand blowing in my eyes, and it hurt. For William Blake, it's an ecstatic revelation. He wrote, "You throw the sand against the wind, and the wind blows it back again. And every sand becomes a gem reflected in the beams divine." To a natural-born visionary like Blake, the divine is revealed by, the divine is every ordinary object. We can try to reject it, but it's always up in our face, like blowing sand. As Blake famously put it, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. Blake's own doors of perception were cleansed early, blown wide open, really. He grew up in the Soho section of London in the mid-18th century. When he was 4 years old, he saw God leaning his forehead against the window, and it left him screaming. By age 8, he'd grown more at home with his expanded perception, and he could enjoy the sight of a tree filled with shining angels. Later, as he watched his brother Robert die, he saw Robert's soul rise joyfully through the roof and into the heavens. No big surprise then that his contemporaries dismissed him as a lunatic. It took more than a century till he became a beacon to Dharma bums everywhere. There's a theory that Blake suffered from ergotoxicosis, a condition that gives rise to hallucinations or spiritual visions, depending on your point of view. It's known among peasants since the Middle Ages as St. Anthony's fire. It's caused by eating rye bread infested by purple ergot fungus, which in the 20th century was refined into LSD. The Doors, the band The Doors, got their name from the Blake passage above, as did Aldous Huxley's pioneering account of his mescaline trips, The Doors of Perception. But Blake's highest epiphanies were also the purest, with no psychedelic special effects required. Once again, it's plain as sand. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That's steep, but simple. Just as ocean is present in every wave, the infinity of existence is present in every object that exists, and eternity in every moment of time. This is not some hippie spiritual fantasy, but a confirmable hypothesis. And Blake has assigned us the lab work to confirm it. You have to look. Put a grain of sand, or a wildflower, or a crumpled gum wrapper, or anything else in the palm of your hand, or just look at your hand. By the way, Blake had at least one actual student in these matters, his wife, Catherine, who learned to see as he did. Look and keep looking for an hour, or eternity, whichever comes first. Eternity comes not at the end of a zillion years. It comes, or rather comes to be noticed in a moment, any moment when time melts away. That's happened to you before, whenever you got so lost in dancing with your headphones on, or pulling the weeds, or practicing your jump shot, or gazing at a star, that time evaporated. It happens whenever you get so lost in enjoying that you're in joy and out of time. When you're so present that past and future are delightfully absent, off on a well-earned vacation. Anything we experience in this eternity discloses infinity. The timeless, weightless whoosh that you and your lover, or you and your cat, feel when you relax and melt into each other's eyes, when the edges between I and you go blurry. It's a glimpse of release from the matrix of time and space. That limitlessness is what we all seek, consciously or not. Failing to find it, we usually settle for a consolation prize, some worthy achievement or tasty snack, something. Still, though, a vague dissatisfaction persists, and sometimes it reveals itself as the deepest of longings. Ah, sunflower, wrote Blake, weary of time, who countest the steps of the sun, seeking after that sweet golden clime where the traveler's journey is done, where the youth pined away with desire and the pale virgin shrouded in snow arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go. Helianthus annuus, the common sunflower, is so named for two reasons. It looks like the sun, and it's heliotropic. It follows the sun as it moves across the sky. It countest the steps of the sun, as Blake says. It plugs along like a hard-working clock, marking the hours and days till it's weary of time. And don't we all grow weary of time? Don't we quietly dream of a sweet golden clime? Clime means climate here, region, place. Don't we all quietly dream of a sweet golden clime where the traveler's journey is done, where we're done slogging through the routine, the responsibilities, the hopes, the fears? Until we learn to be timeless, we're all doing time. For some people, represented here by Blake's youth and pale virgin, the pining may never give way to fulfillment in this world. Right now, numberless beautiful souls weep alone in their rooms, convinced that their body shape or personality quirks disqualify them from being loved. Numberless gentle souls languish in prison, knowing that the violent confusion that landed them there has long since passed. But for all souls, the deepest yearning can still be fulfilled. That sweet golden clime is always available. Where? As Blake says, in the palm of your hand. Even closer than that, the clue is in the name. Sunflower contains sun. We infinity seekers contain, in our essence, we are infinity. As we awaken to what we are, we arise from our graves of dejection and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go, right here. So that's how I do. The book has 22 chapters. In each chapter, most chapters I focus on one writer. I start with Blake, then I go on to Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, Frederick Douglass, The Slave Narrative. I have a chapter on Thoreau, Emerson, and their transcendentalist friends, one chapter on Dr. Seuss, which is a lot of fun. Maybe we'll get to a bit of that today. Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse. Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. So you can see that a number of these writers are writers we might associate with awakening, spirituality, enlightenment, people like Blake. Some of them, Hemingway, right? Dr. Seuss, you would not make that association. But that I kind of had extra fun with. I love drawing the connections that are not obvious. I like going for the high-hanging fruit. So we have Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Kubla Khan, John Donne, one of my very favorite poets, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, which has a lot of wonderful stuff about dying, death, which is really useful to contemplate, just in case you're ever going to have to die. Who knows? Mark Twain, Huck Finn, poetry of John Keats, a crazy little book that not a lot of people know about called Flatland by Edwin Abbott, Macbeth, Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett. I decided that the book needed a Broadway musical, so we've got Oklahoma, Rodgers and Hammerstein, that's fun. Gerard Manley Hopkins, a poet that a little lesser known by some people, one of my very favorites. Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eye, Herman Melville, Moby Dick, Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman, J.D. Salinger. And the final chapter, I write about the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, which is very much misunderstood. It's become controversial these days for reasons that I understand, but there's also some very profound stuff in there. Just a little foretaste of that last chapter. The Star-Spangled Banner, one of the ways in which it's misunderstood is that people think of it as an aggressive, assertive military march. Musically, if you listen to it for a second, oh, say, can you see by the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It's a waltz. It's not a march. It's a waltz. That's a completely different feeling. So it's not a march. It's a waltz. It doesn't assert anything. It asks a question. It actually asks two questions. It's like a koan. It's an ever unfolding, never answered question. And the first question that it asks in the very first line, oh, say, can you see? That's exactly the question that we ask over and over in the Dharma. Can you truly see? Do you truly perceive what's what? This is like Blake saying, hold the thing in the palm of your hand till the doors of perception are cleansed and you see that whatever you're looking at is really infinity. Oh, say, can you see? Now, at the same time, I understand, okay, there's some reasons why the Star-Spangled Banner may not work for everyone anymore. So then I propose several alternatives to it if we were going to have a new one. Of my favorites is by Irving Berlin, and I tell the story. Irving Berlin, as many of you no doubt know, was the great American songwriter, wrote over 800 songs, including White Christmas, Cheek to Cheek, right? Great songs. His favorite song, he wrote for a Broadway show that opened in 1926 and quickly closed. It was a terrible show, but the song was so great that on opening night, the audience made the singer sing 24 encores of it, 24 encores, till she was so exhausted she couldn't remember the words anymore. And Irving Berlin sang it from the first row. I love that story. And the song is, blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. And of course, that's a perfect metaphor for the enlightened state. Many teachers, enlightenment teachers in various traditions, compare the infinity of nirvana, right? This is all about finding nirvana in the classics. It's a metaphor for nirvana, for that state of infinite okayness, infinite okayness. A number of teachers compare it to a blue sky, and to the fact that we, for most of us, right, this side of enlightenment, before nirvana, it's as if the sky is obscured by all kinds of rain clouds. Then when the sky opens up, when the clouds open up, we go, oh, here's this one extraordinary thing, this beautiful clearing, this new event has happened in my life, this clear sky, and it makes me feel so happy and free, and my vision feels so unbounded, right? Perfect metaphor for enlightenment. But when the sky first clears, we think of it as an extraordinary thing. And then when the clouds come again, we might think, oh, gee, it's gone away. But after a while, and this is why, the Buddha's fourth noble truth, keep at it, keep practicing. More and more it becomes clear, wait a minute, that sky is there all the time, behind the clouds, behind the clouds. So we don't need to find some extraordinary thing, some special thing that even when there's cloudy stuff happening in our life, even, people close to you die, of course you cry at the funeral. You stub your toe, of course you curse. I know I do, but more and more that boundless blue sky of infinite okayness is there behind it all. Less and less do you lose contact with that. It really does happen. Whether or not you wind up interested in this book, look, I'm a meditation teacher. I'm a Dharma teacher first and last. And that's really the Dharma message, which is that is there and it's available to everyone. And it's easy. A number of the writers here, I've liked in this book, I find meditation instructions in their writing. One of my favorites, let me see if I can get the page, is Walt Whitman in the opening of Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself. How are we doing for time? You know what? I'll read you a little bit of this. If you picked up Leaves of Grass in a bookstore in Whitman's time and read the opening of Song of Myself, you'd probably guess that the author was the most arrogant jerk ever to set pen to paper. So the opening 3 lines: I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Okay, now that first line, I celebrate myself and sing myself, that first line is a provocation as bold as the frontispiece. Oh, on the previous page, I talk about the frontispiece, right? The illustration in the front of the book, the original edition of Leaves of Grass. Whitman self-published this book, and this picture made a big stir because in those days, to pose as a poet, you put on your Sunday best, you look very formal, you look like you were going to church. And here he is in a peasant's shirt with an open collar, his head to one side, his hips off balance. This was, this is a pose that is deliberately looking like, and I talk a lot in that chapter about he hung out in this new city, Manhattan, which was the first modern city, and had street roughs hanging around. He calls himself Walt Whitman, one of the roughs. In the middle of the print run of the first printing of Leaves of Grass, he stopped the presses and took the picture back to the artist to have him enhance the bulge of the crotch. He wanted to make sure that his virility was on display. True story. Book is full of stories like this. So that first line, I celebrate myself and sing myself, that first line is a provocation as bold as the frontispiece. The second line, And what I assume, you shall assume, only makes things worse. This guy is determined not only to sing his own praises, but to foist upon us his own unsupported assumptions. But the third line changes everything. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Oh, apparently, what's being celebrated here is not the self in the usual sense of a unique, isolated entity with nice, clear boundaries, an individual, an ego. It's fluid, permeable, communal. We're all simmering together in one big universe soup whose morsels are people, planets, animals, trees, all expanding, contracting, mixing, sharing atoms promiscuously. Now we can see that assume means to take on, as when we assume a role or a responsibility or a mortgage. We take on the atoms that come our way. And in this shape-shifting, borderless existence, they all eventually come our way. So when Walt celebrates the self, he's celebrating everyone. I am he as you are me. John Lennon saw that, but only after the acid kicked in. If that's the nature of reality, though, we should be able to see it naturally. But how? Whitman answers in the next line with breathtaking simplicity. I loath and invite my soul. Like Emily Dickinson, she's the previous chapter, he gives us a one-sentence meditation manual, but in his own provocative way. I loath and invite my soul. Loathing, laziness, is one of the deadly sins. Here it's a boast, part of the celebration of oneself and of the new Manhattan culture where loafers were badass street idlers. It's also skillful means. After we've tried everything else, lazing turns out to be the most efficient way to invite our soul, our essence. Just leave off doing and marinate in being, which is the soul. Of course, that soul is always already here. What we're actually inviting is our recognition of it. Okay, so I think maybe that's enough of me yakking for a while. Jamie, shall we?
Yes, thank you so much for that. It was wonderful to hear you talk about it. And again, so lucky we got you 2 days after pub day. So thanks. We do have a couple questions here. Question. Okay, so how did you come into this idea of reviewing kind of pop culture books and movies to reveal the spiritual wisdom?
Well, it's just the nature of my insanity, I guess. You know, I got this an earlier book that I wrote about enlightenment lessons from movies, where I deliberately only wrote about, while I was working on it, and you know, friends would ask what I was doing, and I'd say, oh, I'm writing a movie about writing a book about enlightenment in the movies. And people would say, oh, you've got to write about the Matrix, and you've got to, and they would suggest all this very obvious stuff. So I made a point of not writing about anything that anyone else suggested, because I figured if they were already seeing it, then, you know, that's no fun. So I wrote about The Godfather, Jaws, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Graduate, Casablanca, The Big Sleep. I mean, I've been a film nut forever. In the prep school where I used to teach, I taught a course called in classic cinema, and I introduced the kids to, you know, Fellini and Bergman and Chaplin and all that. But so what would happen was I would come out of a movie with my wife, and I'd say, look, honey, did you see that one? This thing is this thing and this thing and this thing. And, you know, just talking her ear off. And she'd say, Dean, why don't you go off into the over to your desk there and write that down, kind of give me a break here. And that's really how that book started. So that was my movie book. And then here especially, as I said before, teaching literature, it was so alive in my mind that I couldn't help doing it. I was just kind of brimming over with this.
Did you write this during the pandemic? Can we talk about your writing process?
Sure.
Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah, I always love hearing writers talk about, well, my process. I write every day. I did it, and I always go, God, what the heck is my process? Because it doesn't follow much of a regular pattern. I think other people must be much more systematic or something than I am, including people who write every day. I'm sure you've heard that from so many of your authors. Write every day, that's the key. I write every day when I have a contract. Right? When I have a contract and a deadline, I get stuff done. Otherwise, I'm pretty much sitting around playing my ukulele. I mean, I'm teaching meditation but I was the same way in school. It's very funny. As an English teacher, I always told my students, don't wait till the last night to write your papers. Start them early, come to see. When I was in school, every paper, without exception, I started the night before it was due. And I got A's on them all because I was a good writer, that. So that doesn't work for everyone. So yeah, I did write the bulk of the writing I did during pandemic. You see, I'm wearing a nice shirt here for the camera. Yes. From the waist down, I'm in my jammies. I wrote this book in my jammies.
Like, how did you identify which books too?
Yeah, well, some of them I was just brimming over with. They were books that I'd been teaching forever, and I needed to. I actually wrote an essay about Macbeth, and from a Dharma point of view, over 20 years ago, which I published and at that time, that's when I was still teaching at that prep school. And I published that essay in a little kind of faculty journal we had. And that became, much, much revised 20 years later because my writing's gotten better. That's the Macbeth chapter now in the Dharma Bum's Guide. So some of it, I taught that. I taught Huck Finn for years. And then some of it was just people that have to be there. You have to have William Blake. You right. Can't write about nirvana in literature without Blake, without Emily Dickinson, Whitman. And then there were some, well, the best story about this is I knew I needed, there's the big three nominees for the great American novel: Huckleberry Finn, The Great Gatsby, and Moby Dick. So I knew all three of those had to be in this book. And I had taught Gatsby for years. I had taught Huck Finn for years, no problem. I had never taught Moby Dick because it's too long, that would like take over your whole semester.
Right.
But every year I would tell my American Lit students, we would read one of Melville's stories. We would read Bartleby the Scrivener. But every year I would make this speech about how the Moby Dick is just one of the great, great books. You have to read it sometime before you die, or your life is going to be poorer. It's just right. The whole time I had never read it. I was faking, and I tell this story. My Moby Dick chapter starts with me confessing, bearing my soul. I had never read it, so now I said, finally, my karma has caught up with me to write this chapter. I had to read it. And it turned out, fortunately, that I was not a liar, that Moby Dick was as great as I had told everyone. And also much weirder than I had imagined, and much funnier than Moby Dick is hilarious. It's full of comedy and all kinds of crazy stuff. There's this one passage and everyone, oh, there's all this gory stuff with hunting down the whales and so forth. So there's this one passage, they've hunted down a sperm whale. And you hear, and the whole process, because, Melville really did this. He shipped out on a whaling boat. So he was writing about this stuff firsthand. So they capture and they kill the sperm whale. They haul it up next to the ship. They decapitate it. I mean, it's just grisly. There's a whole chapter about butchering it and decapitating it. And then when they decapitate it, they drain this waxy substance out of its head, which is called sperm or spermaceti. That's why it's called sperm whale. Mm-hmm. And this stuff was used to make candles, right? But as soon as the stuff, so it comes out of the whale. I hope I'm not grossing people out too much. As soon as this stuff comes out of the whale's head, of course it's warm, but it starts to cool off and it starts to coagulate into globules. And the sailors have to sit down on the deck and with all their hands in this big tank of warm sperm or spermaceti, kneading the globules out of it.
Wow.
Right. Isn't that crazy? But now, hang on.
Okay, I'm excited.
Listen to what Melville does with that. Where's the... Okay, let me find the page.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is nuts.
It's funny. I think that might be the only one of the list I haven't read either. And now,
well, one of my favorite things was when I was working. By the way, I had a wonderful editor on this, Jason Gardner. He's the executive editor at New World Library.
Wow.
And I was so lucky to wind up with him because he was just expert at recognizing. I mean, this is what a good editor does. Recognizing what my really good ideas were and encouraging them, and recognizing my really bad ideas. And I had a lot of those, and just kind of gently talking me down from them, right? But there were a number of places in his notes to me where he said, oh, I've never read that book before, and now I have to read it. You got me, right?
See?
So that's exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and just the way I love the passion that you have for even kind of enlightening us about it is just so contagious.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is my favorite thing to hear. In the introduction to the book, I talk about my first two gurus, right? My first guru, okay, I'll show you the picture. My first guru was Alfred E. Newman, the mascot of Mad Magazine, okay? And I start off, true story, 1961, I'm 11 or 12 years old, and we were my family, we were going to go out to a drive-in movie that night. Drive-in movies were a thing way before you were born, Jamie. And I went out to the Nash Rambler station wagon, another thing before you were born, to clear out the back seat from all the comic books and toys that my brothers and I had left there. Okay. And I go out there and my mind is churning, because even at the age of 11, 12, my mind was like churning with anxiety, like all the time. And I'm in the middle of that. I pick up, the next thing I see is a Mad Magazine with that face on the cover and his slogan. I don't know if you can read that. What me worry? And all of a sudden, my mind stopped. And I realized that this churning was a thing, that's a thing. It's called worry, and that I was doing it. It's as if like this engine had been racing all the time. And I realized, oh, it's because my foot is on the accelerator. And here's where and now I can take my foot off. And everything inside me went silent. And that was my first clear samadhi experience.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It can come from anywhere. Emily Dickinson wrote, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. Right. That's my method for Dharma practice. That was my method for writing this. You just got to be open to every direction.
It's great.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So, and I went and I talk about it in the chapter. I just that whole rest of the evening, while sitting through this dumb movie, Troy Donahue movie, and everything, just floating in bliss and the bliss. And then, a little while later, I started reading the text and going, oh, this is not just some weird, freaky thing that happened to me. This is called samadhi or satori or grace. And, oh, here are the methods for getting back there and for eventually making it permanent. Right. So that became the direction of my life. So that was my first guru. My second guru, as I explained in the introduction, was John Fresius, was my high school English teacher at Van Nuys High School, who was passionate, like, thank you, the highest compliment to me. He was like that. He just made me completely fall in love with literature. And I went, oh, that's what I want to do. If I'm going to have a job, I want to be that. I want to be that English teacher for someone. So that's what I did.
That's so great. And, kind of to pivot just a bit, but you also are really into meditation. And I know that you were doing this before it was cool, right? Before it was the big thing to do.
I was doing it when every public lecture I gave on meditation, I made a joke about no flying carpets, no beds of nails, right? No crystal balls. And I said it as a joke, but you had to say it because in those days, people thought it was just some weirdo Eastern hippie cult stuff. Nowadays, like everybody's brother-in-law is taking a meditation course at the Y to lower his blood pressure. Everyone knows that it's healthy, it's good for you. But most people, here's the thing that still most people don't get. Most people think, oh, I should do that, but it's hard, isn't it? Right? Trying to clear your mind. I can't clear my mind. I can't concentrate. Well, guess what? After 50 whatever years of meditation, I can't concentrate. That's not what it's about. And that's why because I'll give you right here in one sentence. This sentence is in this book somewhere. Took me like 50 years to get this formulated. This is like the E=mc² of meditation, as far as I'm concerned. Any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation. Right? I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation. Right?
It makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Once you hear that, you go, well, yeah, of course. And that's why when you hear people say, well, I tried to meditate. I mean, I just stop them right there. Trying to meditate is a contradiction in terms. And that's why I love pointing out when Whitman says, I loaf and invite my soul. Right? That's what and as a meditation teacher, this is essentially what I learned from my best teachers. And this is what I teach people. By the way, folks, my website, deansluyter.com, Sluyter has got a funny spelling. It's got a U in it. But deansluyter.com, I've got that's the gateway to, I do 3 times a week Zoom meditations. They're open to everyone. They're absolutely free. Jamie's posting, there's my website, Jamie's posting it. And I would love if you go to my website, there's a place where you can sign up to be on the invite list. And I'd love to see you all in my meditation. Because this is what I show people, how to stop efforting. Right? That's the deal with meditation. I want to come full circle. So we've got all these sailors now having to knead the globules out of the sperm, right?
Right.
Okay, but listen to where Melville goes with this. As I sat there at my ease, cross-legged on the deck, right? This already sounds like meditation.
Yeah.
As I sat there at my ease, cross-legged on the deck, under a blue, tranquil sky, the ship under indolent sail and gliding so serenely along, as I bathed my hands among those soft, gentle globules. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. All the morning long, I squeezed that sperm till I myself almost melted into it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself, of course, he calls it insanity, I call it nirvana. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborers' hands in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globules. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this avocation beget, that at last I was continually squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, "Oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer know the slightest ill humor or envy? Come, let us squeeze hands all round. Nay, let us all squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness. Would that I could keep squeezing that sperm forever. In thoughts of the visions of the night, I saw long rows of angels in paradise, each one with his hands in a jar of spermaceti."
Wow.
Yes, that's what I
That's
said.
fascinating. And it's very almost like magical, the way it all kind
Yes.
of comes together.
Yes. That doesn't need a lot of commentary.
No,
Melville's
not at
right
all.
there with it.
Wow. I love that you shared that. That was just such a perfect example right there all around.
Yeah.
We real quick from Sonia, where is the enlightenment or striving for in Macbeth? I know we touched on Macbeth.
Right. Oh my gosh, Macbeth is so, as usual. I mean, Shakespeare is so deep, so rich. I taught it to my sophomores every year and always took a month. But okay, it starts with the witches in Act 1, Scene 1, saying, "Fair is foul and foul is fair." Now, from our usual perspective, that makes no sense. That's saying good is bad, bad is good, white is dark, dark is light. That makes no sense, right?
Right.
It's like saying matter is energy, energy is matter. Oh, wait a minute. Matter is energy, energy is matter, right? That's what Einstein showed us, right? The things that appear to be what appear to be the pairs of opposites, when we move to this bigger perspective, we see, no, they're part of this bigger whole. And I show in my Macbeth chapter how that language is echoed in the language of the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, which is a platform scripture of Mahayana Buddhism that says form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. And then I show how Macbeth's, I mean, there's a lot of commentary to make sense of this, but how Macbeth's whole problem is failing to see that forms are temporary. Form, you thinking the form of being the king, that's going to be right, but unlike his buddy Banquo, he gets attached. They're always the classic thing. Usually the way Macbeth is taught, they say, oh, he's a tragic hero, so he's got to have a fatal flaw. His fatal flaw is ambition. He has this great ambition to be the king, but that's not the case. The witches tell him at the beginning, you're going to be the king. That's a done deal. But they say, all hail Macbeth that shalt be king hereafter, right? Eventually, mañana, right? So his fatal flaw is not ambition, it's impatience. It's, I gotta have it now. I gotta have it now, rather than, right? And I one story I tell in that chapter is, this business of type A and type B personality. That whole thing was discovered by a cardiologist named Dr. Meyer Friedman. And the way he discovered it was that after several years of practice, the couches in his waiting room were starting to get kind of shabby and worn out. So he brought an upholsterer in to give him an estimate to reupholster his couches. And the upholsterer examined them and he said, "This is remarkable. I've never seen this before." He said, everyone's couches, they wear out first in the back. Yours have all worn out first in the front along the leading edge, down here along the leading edge. And Friedman realized it was because the people that filled his waiting room were all these hypertensive types who were all like leaning forward all the time, like trying to lean forward into the next thing, the next moment, right? Like, you know, when you're driving and you're in a hurry, you're running late and you're stuck in traffic. By the way, you always think, I'm stuck in traffic, everyone else is the traffic. Funny thing, they all think you're the traffic. Right. But so when you know that thing, you're gripping the steering wheel and you're kind of going, trying to be in the next block.
Yes.
You know that thing?
Yes.
Have you noticed it doesn't work?
No, it makes me more anxious.
Well, today's the first day of the rest of your life, Jamie. It doesn't work. Now, think of all the other ways in your life that you're doing that, that trying to be in the next thing, And what it does is it keeps you from just relaxing back and being this thing, right? And we get Banquo as kind of Macbeth's doppelganger. Macbeth is the guy who's mellow. He's type B. B stands for Banquo here. He gets that. And by the time we get to the end of the play, the big epiphany for Macbeth is, you know, he starts seeing the writing in the wall, and he gives what's possibly the greatest soliloquy ever written. I take a couple of pages to break it down. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death, etc.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a whole lot of fun with Macbeth.
Oh my goodness. I know we're getting down to it here, but this has just been so much fun chatting with you. And one last question. Okay.
Please.
Are you working on anything now that you can speak of?
Well, I've got a bunch of ideas that have been on the back burner, simmering in different little saucepans. And then I'll get excited and think, okay, no, this is the one I'm going to bring to the front burner. And then the next day, no, this one. And so we'll see. At some point, I'll have a conversation with my editor and see what's going to be next. And so I'll be surprised also.
Well, wishing you the best of luck. And you must promise to come up here next time you're on tour so we can see you in person.
Yes.
Sonia says, from one English teacher to another, thank you for the Macbeth.
Thank you, Sonia.
And yes, everyone who is watching this is being recorded. You will all get an email tomorrow that'll have a link to the recording. It'll have the discount code, previous titles by Dean. It'll have Dean's website. It'll basically have everything you need. So if you just watched tonight, we've got you covered. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for hosting this. This has really been so much fun. And folks, please, do, if it's talking to you, come to my website and come to one of my Zoom sessions. I would, you're all kind of invisible presences out there. I'd love to see your faces, have you jump into the meditation with me.
Great. Thank you so much. And have a great evening.